My name is Ruth Ellison. I'm 63 years old, a retired accountant, and the widow of Judge Henry Ellison. Numbers used to be my language. Calm, steady, always balanced. I thought people worked the same way, that honesty could be counted like columns on a page. I learned otherwise at my son's wedding. They say silence is weakness. That night, it became my weapon. Before I tell you what happened, let me say this. If you've ever been humiliated in front of people you love, stay with me. Because this isn't a story about revenge. It's about what dignity sounds like when everyone else is laughing. The evening began like any other celebration. The hotel lights shimmered over the water, the kind of glow that makes everyone look more expensive than they really are. I had paid for most of it, quietly, through transfers and deposits months in advance. Liam, my only son, had asked me for help with a soft voice that reminded me of when he was 10 and wanted extra paint for his science project. I never said no to him then. I didn't say no now. I wore a navy dress Henry had loved, simple but proper. Cassie, my new daughter-in-law, had chosen something far brighter, sequins that caught every light and every eye. The band was playing a slow jazz number when she stepped up to the microphone for her thank you speech. I remember the moment the violins cut off mid-note. She turned toward me, her smile stretched like glass about to break. "You don't belong here," she said, clear, into the mic. At first, I thought I'd misheard. The guests froze. The servers stopped moving. Even the champagne bubbles seemed to hang in midair. I saw Liam standing beside her, his face caught between horror and loyalty. He didn't say a word. I felt every gaze in that room slide toward me. Some curious, some pitying, a few grateful it wasn't them. My hands didn't shake. I took my clutch from the table, adjusted the strap on my wrist, and stood. No one stopped me. The sound system hummed softly, waiting for music that never returned. I walked past the florist's display I had paid for, past the marble arch I had ordered months ago. My heels clicked evenly against the floor, like the seconds on a clock counting down. Outside, the air smelled of rain. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. When you're married to a judge for 30 years, you learn the difference between reaction and response. I opened my umbrella and headed toward the parking lot. The first drops tapped against the fabric, a rhythm calmer than the orchestra inside. From behind me, I could still hear fragments of voices, someone whispering her name, someone else gasping. A few guests hurried after me, unsure what to say. I smiled politely and told them to go back inside. The rain grew heavier, and I thought of Henry. He used to say that storms only wash away what no longer belongs. I unlocked the car, slipped inside, and rested my hands on the steering wheel. My reflection in Tomoto. The windshield looked older, maybe wiser, maybe just tired. Through the glass, I could still see the ballroom glowing with gold light. Inside, Cassie must have realized her microphone was still live. The echo of her own words carried faintly into the night, sharp, cold, and amplified for every guest to hear again. I started the engine, not because I wanted to leave, but because I needed somewhere private to breathe. The wipers slid back and forth, steady as my heartbeat. The phone on the passenger seat buzzed once, an automated reminder from the bank about my scheduled payments for the wedding expenses. For a second, I almost canceled it right then. Instead, I looked out at the rain and waited. You learn a lot about people when they think the microphone is off. I had learned enough for one night. I drove home slowly along the coastal road. The sea on my right was restless, the kind of gray that hides depth. Each wave hit the rocks and vanished again. I thought about the moment Liam didn't speak. That silence hurt more than the words Cassie had said. But deep down, I understood what silence could do if I used it right. When I reached my house, the porch light flickered to life as if the place still recognized me. I hung my wet coat, poured a cup of tea, and sat by the window. The sound of the storm softened, turning into something almost kind. Somewhere inside my phone, a voicemail from Henry waited. One I hadn't listened to in years. I wasn't ready yet. But soon, the wedding would go on without me. The band would play again. People would pretend nothing had happened. And Cassie, she would think she'd won something that night. She was wrong, because an hour later the music stopped. And by then, everything she thought she owned no longer belonged to her. They think the loudest moment defines you. I learned to let the quiet do the work. If you're still here, listen closely. There are things I did that night anyone can do when humiliation is met with patience and a clear plan. Stay with me for a minute, and I'll show you how a single careful choice can change everything. I drove home with the rain tapping the windshield like a patient hand. The car smelled faintly of lemon from the air freshener Liam used to keep in his glove compartment. For a while, I sat in the dark and watched the storm. The house was small and orderly, everything in its place. I made tea by habit rather than need, and settled with a blanket over my knees. The warmth felt ordinary and essential, like a kind word you give yourself when no one else will. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A notification from the bank popped up, a summary of scheduled wedding payments and pending authorizations. I told myself it was routine. Then I opened the banking app, and the numbers arranged themselves into a kind of clarity I had not asked to see. $84,000 in total transfers that I had authorized over time. Deposits for the venue, the florist, the band, the little things that make a night feel like a scene in a movie. Names and notes beside each transaction, and then a line that stopped my breath. Cassandra Vaughn, authorized payer. I stared at that name as if it would rearrange itself into a misunderstanding. Instead, the app showed a timestamp, a tiny notation. Authorized on file. Permission granted. My stomach settled into a cold knot. I had trusted the signatures and the paperwork I signed months ago. I had been careful with accounts that Henry and I had kept tidy like a ledger of our life. But I also trusted Liam to speak up if something felt wrong. He had not. I replayed the night in my mind. The way Cassie had stepped forward and smiled as if belittling was a kind of charm. I thought of the way she arranged things, how her world was measured in images and bookings and sudden upgrades. The app did not interpret motive. It only showed facts. Facts are steady. Facts do not bend when someone shouts into a microphone. Facts wait. I found Henry's old messages in a folder I had avoided. He'd left me a handful of voice memos in the months after he died. I had not listened to them because some tapes are like photographs you are not ready to develop. In my hand that night, I pressed the oldest one first. His voice came through, older and quieter than I remembered, but steady the way a judge's voice should be. "Ruth," he said, "do not mistake your silence for surrender. Keep your books in order. When people mistake silence for weakness, they forget how to account for what you did." He paused, and there was a small laugh. "Keep a ledger, Ruth. It will remind you who you are." He always had a way of turning a practical suggestion into a moral order. I felt something shift in me like a gear. Where I could have been consumed by embarrassment, I found a narrowing focus instead. Henry's voice was not an instruction to be vengeful. It was a prescription for clarity. I closed the app and opened a new folder on my laptop labeled Restoration. The name felt precise and clean. The first real thing I did that evening that belonged simply to me. I began by calling the bank's customer service line. I recorded the call on purpose, and with the quiet of someone who does not need to shout over anyone. The woman on the other end was polite and procedural. She read terms and asked for verification. I listened. I told her I was Ruth Ellison and that I needed to review a list of authorizations connected to my account. She asked for account numbers and security phrases. I gave them calmly, the way you read a number off a form. I asked about recent grants of authority. She read back entries. I noted every name, every timestamp. Next, I called the venue. I asked to speak with the event manager. He answered cheerfully, assuming I called to check on final arrangements. I told him my name and said quietly that I needed to confirm final payments. I listened to him tell me the schedule for the night, the band's fee, the deposit conditions. He told me where the checks had been applied. I asked for the vendor contact who had set the payment to forward. He gave me an email address and a name I recognized from the invoice copies I had filed away. I thanked him and ended the call before my voice could betray the plan forming like a slow bloom. Each call was a small step away from theater and back into the ledger. Each call turned the night from an insult into a series of verifiable entries I could point to one by one. When I called the florist, a woman mumbled apologies and said she had already begun canceling orders. When I called the band, their manager told me the deposit had been processed and they were waiting for final confirmation. Little by little, the world returned to accountancy. Things either were paid for properly or they were not. Before midnight, I listened to Henry's second memo. He said, "When you choose silence, add action to it. The rest is paperwork." I made a list of every transfer tied to that night and set reminders to check statuses. I ordered copies of invoices I had thought settled and flagged the ones that had anything that did not match my records. The rain outside lessened into a steady mist. My hands moved with the methodical patience of someone who had balanced spreadsheets and held an irreplaceable calm. I thought of Liam in that quiet, how he had watched Cassie speak and not stopped her. I thought of the small boy who once brought home a crooked science project and needed a steady hand to glue the parts together. My plan would not be loud. It would be precise. It would be written. Morning came slow and gray, the kind of light that makes everything look honest whether it wants to or not. I made coffee the way Henry used to, strong enough to wake the walls. The rain had stopped, leaving the windows streaked and clean. My laptop still sat open on the dining table where I had left it. The folder labeled Restoration blinked back at me like a small challenge. I have always believed that order is a form of kindness. You treat details the way you wish people would treat you, with respect, precision, and care. So, I began sorting through every contract tied to the wedding. There were 27 in total, stacked in a digital folder and printed in a binder Cassie once called adorably old-fashioned. Each agreement bore my signature in blue ink. I read every clause line by line. By the third contract, something I'd almost forgotten appeared like a quiet friend returning at the right time. Clause 9B, breach of social trust. Henry had drafted that clause years ago when he helped me manage a community fund. It was simple. If an event sponsored by a donor or stakeholder was conducted in a manner deemed publicly defamatory or reputationally harmful, the donor had the right to revoke funding and halt all payments without penalty. It had been a precaution, tucked into templates I reused for convenience. Cassie's event fell squarely within it. I sat back, the corners of my mouth lifting in a kind of restrained amazement. All this time, she had treated those papers as mere formality. She had uploaded her influencer contracts, copied my templates, and never read the small print. The irony felt precise. I opened a new document, a checklist. Step 1. Revoke authorizations. Step 2. Issue freeze requests. Step 3. Document every action. The words looked clean and achievable. I called the bank first. The representative sounded different from the night before, more formal, maybe sensing the tone in my voice. I told her that, per Clause 9B of the signed vendor agreements, all linked transfers and pending debits tied to the event known as the Von Ellison wedding were to be revoked. She asked for confirmation numbers. I provided them without hesitation. Her pause after verifying the clause was long. Then she said, "Understood, Mrs. Ellison. We'll process this within the hour." Next, I drafted emails to every vendor. I thanked them for their services, cited contractual rights, and attached the clause. I kept my tone polite, factual, almost warm. Years of working with invoices had taught me that tone changes response times. I attached digital revocation letters signed and time-stamped. My printer hummed, producing copies for my records, the sound steady and satisfying. When the florist called back, her voice trembled. "Mrs. Ellison, I'm sorry about what happened. We saw the video online. You didn't deserve that." I told her there was no need to apologize. I only asked her to confirm receipt of my revocation notice. She did, softly, almost gratefully. I thanked her, logged the timestamp, and closed the call. I created a folder within Restoration called Ledger of Trust. Every document went there. Calls, emails, screenshots, receipts. The name wasn't just symbolic. It was my way of turning humiliation into data. By late morning, I had canceled or frozen nearly every payment linked to Cassie's event. The remaining few required manual sign-offs, which I scheduled for the afternoon. I paused long enough to pour another cup of coffee and glance at the framed photo of Henry on the shelf. His eyes, caught mid-laugh, seemed to hold a knowing patience. My phone vibrated with a text from an unfamiliar number. It read, "Hi, Mrs. Ellison. This is Nadia from Everlight Events. I just wanted to confirm if the cancellation notice was final." Nadia was the wedding planner Cassie had hired. I remembered her face vaguely, nervous, overworked, always agreeing too quickly. I replied that the notice was final and legally supported. She wrote back almost instantly, "I understand. You were right to do it." Something about that message lingered. You were right. She knew something. I bookmarked her number. There would be time to ask questions later. Around noon, I organized a digital backup of every document and labeled them by category: financial, legal, communications, public. Then I printed a summary sheet and titled it The Restoration Plan. It was a small, deliberate act, but it made the room feel ordered again. For the first time since the wedding, I let myself breathe without that shallow tension in my chest. Humiliation had turned into motion. Motion had turned into record. I stepped outside for a moment. The air smelled clean, the kind of freshness that comes only after a hard rain. Across the street, Evelyn, my neighbor, waved lightly from her porch. She had probably heard something about the wedding already. News traveled fast in small coastal towns. She mouthed, "Are you all right?" I nodded, smiling faintly. She didn't need to know the details yet. She'd know soon enough. Back inside, I placed all printed pages into a fireproof box Henry had left behind. His initials were still carved on the lid. I ran my hand across the wood and whispered, "Ledger balanced." It was something he used to say at the end of a long day. a private signal that the world made sense again. My phone chimed, a reminder for an afternoon appointment. I had set one the night before with Maggie Shore, my oldest friend and real estate attorney. I called to confirm, and she answered in her brisk, dependable tone. "I've seen the clip, Ruth. I was hoping you'd call." "Maggie," I said quietly, "I'm bringing something you'll want to read. Bring your legal glasses." When I hung up, I looked once more at the open folder on my laptop. The files sat there like soldiers in formation. My humiliation had been public. My response would be private, methodical, and unstoppable. I closed the lid, gathered my papers, and felt a calm I hadn't felt in years. The world had tried to make me small. Instead, it had made me precise. The morning after, my phone woke me before the alarm did. A string of messages from numbers I didn't recognize filled the screen, each one with the same kind of urgency I used to associate with office emergencies. Only this time, they were links, videos, comments, a single caption repeated over and over. When the bride forgot her mic was still on. I didn't open it at first. I made coffee, watered the fern by the window, and let the phone buzz itself quiet. When I finally watched the clip, I did so without sound at first, as if I were reviewing evidence. The image showed Cassie in her silver gown, champagne glass raised, the microphone glinting in her hand. Then I unmuted. Her voice filled the room again, clear as a verdict. "You don't belong here." The clip ended with my back turned, my hand steady on the clutch, the soft murmur of guests, and then someone whispering, "Oh my God, she's still on the mic." The video looped. I watched it twice. I didn't feel anger. I felt a kind of confirmation. Humiliation becomes smaller when you can measure it. A message from Evelyn appeared next. "Ruth, I think you should see this before it spreads further." She sent another link, a Facebook post shared in a local group. Hundreds of reactions, comments filling faster than I could scroll. Most were strangers. "Poor woman. The bride's tone says everything. How do people treat elders like this?" Others guessed who we were, naming the venue, identifying Liam in the corner of the frame. Social media had already built its courtroom. I set the phone face down and stared at the table. Henry used to say public opinion moves faster than justice, but rarely in the same direction. I wasn't sure yet if the tide favored me or just enjoyed the spectacle. Then another notification appeared, a video from Cassie herself. She sat in what looked like her bedroom, light ring glowing, makeup done too carefully for someone claiming to regret anything. Her voice trembled in practiced sorrow. "I want to apologize," she said. "It was a misunderstanding. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, especially family." The comments were split evenly between sympathy and suspicion. I watched her pause between lines, waiting for tears that wouldn't come. I muted the video and read the reactions instead. "This feels scripted. If she's sorry, why not call her mother-in-law?" Someone replied with my name. Someone else replied with my address. The internet had found me, but I wasn't hiding. I didn't answer anyone. Silence online feels like weakness to people addicted to noise, but it's also the one thing they can't argue with. Instead, I forwarded the clip to Maggie with a single line. Public Exhibit A. By afternoon, I drove to her office. Maggie greeted me with the same professional calm she'd used in courtrooms for decades. She didn't ask how I was. She simply pointed to a chair and said, "We start by securing your name." On her screen were the same videos, the same comments. This works in your favor, she said. The insult's public. The contracts have conduct clauses. You can revoke payments legally and morally. I already did, I told her, sliding the printed letters across her desk. She looked at them, nodded once, and smiled faintly. Of course you did. Victor joined us by video call from his office downtown. His glasses reflected spreadsheets, columns of numbers that might as well have been a foreign language to anyone else. I've traced most of the transfers, he said. The funds Cassie redirected went through a shell LLC registered to a woman named Belinda Vaughn. Her mother, I said. He nodded. We can prove misuse of donor funds if it comes to that. And with the clip viral, public sympathy's already building your foundation. I looked at the screen, at the neat columns of data, at Maggie's confident expression. The humiliation of last night had become evidence, and evidence could be shaped into justice. When I left her office, the sun had finally burned through the clouds. I drove along the shoreline again. And for the first time, the sea didn't look gray. It looked honest, reflecting light rather than hiding it. My phone kept vibrating with new notifications. Cassie's apology had trended briefly, but now the comments were turning. People had found inconsistencies in her story, screenshots of past posts showing her bragging about funding the whole event myself. The public doesn't forgive arrogance once it smells deceit. At a red light, I opened my messages again. Evelyn had sent a new one. You handled yourself with grace, Ruth. The whole neighborhood's talking about it. Everyone saw how calm you were. Grace. That was the word Henry used to like. Not kindness, not patience. Grace, justice with manners. I typed back, Thank you, Evelyn. Tell them not to pity me. I'm quite busy restoring order. At home, I opened my folder again and added new subfiles. Public reaction, apology video, social influence records. It looked neat, symmetrical, complete. The beginning of something larger than gossip. That evening, as the sky softened into violet, I brewed tea and watched the reflections dance on the window. For the first time, I realized the story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been dismissed with a smile and a microphone. Cassie wanted followers. Now she had them, just not the kind she'd hoped for. By the next morning, I had stopped checking my phone for updates. The internet could devour itself if it wanted to. I had other things to do. Real things. Things that left paper trails and signatures. The lamp on my desk glowed softly against the stacks of contracts and bank records I'd laid out like puzzle pieces waiting to fit together. The air smelled faintly of printer ink and coffee. Order felt close, almost reachable. Maggie arrived just before 10, a folder tucked under her arm, her glasses sliding down her nose the way they always had in college. She didn't waste time on sympathy. She set her bag on the chair and said, "Show me what you've got." I turned the screen toward her. The restoration folder gleamed like a tiny courtroom. She flipped through my printouts one by one, murmuring to herself, Clause 9b, valid, correct citation, signatures intact. Ruth, you've built a bulletproof file. Old habits, I said quietly. She looked up, eyes bright with professional pride. And you called the bank already? Everything's frozen. Good. Let's confirm your financial coverage. We'll document the transfers before they try to hide them. I called Victor as she organized her notes. His voice came through the speakerphone, calm and efficient. Morning, ladies. I've been reviewing Cassie's accounts. Your instinct was right, Ruth. The money trail's messier than I expected. Half of the deposits she made came from your trust fund account. Small withdrawals over months. likely disguised as vendor prepayments. Maggie jotted notes while I stared at the screen. How could she access that? She didn't. Liam did, Victor said carefully. Remember when he asked you for temporary access to pay the photographer? He added Cassie as a linked contact, which granted limited visibility. She used that to route payments through her mother's company. I can prove intent. The word intent settled in the air like a dropped pin. Maggie leaned back, tapping her pen. If this were court, we'd be halfway to a verdict. But we'll need one more piece, proof of coercion or fraud. Meaning? I asked. Someone Cassie pressured to fabricate invoices or overcharge. It's common. Find one person willing to talk, and this becomes not just personal restitution, but a legal case. The name came to me before Maggie finished the sentence. Nadia, I said. The planner. Maggie nodded. Good start. Approach her calmly. People in her position respond better to dignity than accusation. Victor added, I can draft a financial affidavit template. If she signs it, we can use it to confirm Cassie's misrepresentation of vendor costs. I looked between them, one mind built for law, the other for numbers, and felt the strange safety of having logic on my side. After they left, I sat for a while in the quiet, the lamp burning gently beside me. I thought of Henry again. He had always said that law and light work the same way. They only reveal what's already there. I opened an email draft and began writing to Nadia. The words came easily. Dear Ms. Klein, I understand recent changes may have caused inconvenience. I would appreciate meeting briefly to clarify outstanding matters. Please let me know a time that suits you best. It was polite, neutral, and impossible to refuse. When I hit send, I checked the time. 11:47 a.m. I had been working without pause since sunrise. I stood, stretched, and looked out the window. The sun had found its way through the coastal mist, lighting up the garden Henry once kept meticulous. Every rosebush still bloomed in quiet order. The sight steadied me. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Evelyn stood outside, holding a small box. I baked this, she said, smiling shyly. You've been in the news, Ruth. People are saying you handled it like a saint. I'm just handling it, I replied. She hesitated. You know, sometimes the quietest people make the biggest noise. Only when necessary, I said. When she left, I returned to my desk and found a reply from Nadia already waiting. I can meet tomorrow morning. Please don't tell anyone I reached out. That was enough for now. I flagged the message and opened my notes again. Maggie had left a page of handwritten advice. Document motives, stay calm, let the paper speak. I smiled. She knew me well enough to know I needed no reminder. The afternoon passed in steady rhythm. Victor sent over preliminary financial charts, lines of transactions, coded by date and vendor. I examined each entry, circling the ones marked as routed through Vaughn Holdings. The amounts weren't random. They followed a pattern. Smaller transfers first, then one large transfer 2 days before the wedding, labeled Venue Insurance Extension. It wasn't insurance, it was a cover. I saved the file, added it to my binder, and shut off the lamp for a moment. The room darkened, shadows climbing up the walls like slow tides. In the reflection of the window, I saw myself sitting there, not the woman who had been told she didn't belong, but someone who was quietly deciding who did. When I turned the lamp back on, the light landed directly on Henry's photo. His expression seemed different, as if he could see where this was going. Don't worry, I whispered. I'm not angry. I'm auditing. That night, Before bed, I went through the vendor directory one last time and double-checked every name. Beneath the calm surface, everything lined up. The legal clause, the digital trail, the public humiliation now turning into evidence. All that remained was to bring it together, piece by deliberate piece. I closed the laptop, blew out the candle beside the lamp, and let the darkness settle gently around me. For the first time in days, I slept soundly. When I woke the next morning, the sky was pale blue and still. The kind of morning that doesn't make promises, only space for decisions. I brewed coffee and stood at the window watching the light spread over the lawn. My mind was already working, arranging the day into columns, numbers, times, actions, a ledger of justice. Maggie arrived right on time. She carried her usual black notebook and that expression she wore whenever a plan was about to take shape. Victor joined us by video call, his voice sharp and steady. We sat around the dining table where Henry and I once spent years balancing household budgets. It felt right to use it again. "Let's start with scope," Maggie said. "We need a coordinated plan. Everything revoked, frozen, and documented in one window. No leaks, no delays." Victor nodded from his screen. "The key is timing. Banks and vendors process in sequence. If we move simultaneously, she won't have time to reroute anything. I can initiate freezes the moment Ruth makes her calls." I took a deep breath and said, "How long will the full execution take?" Victor adjusted his glasses. 1 hour, maybe less." 1 hour. The words sat in the air, solid as a verdict. Maggie began outlining steps in neat, numbered order. First, revoke all pending payments at the bank. Second, notify vendors to confirm contractual cancellation. Third, call the resort to block the honeymoon booking. Fourth, record confirmations and send timestamp follow-up emails. I nodded. "And after?" "After," she said with a faint smile, "we wait for the sound of silence." We spent the next hour refining the timeline. Victor cross-checked transaction IDs while Maggie drafted the legal wording. I wrote my own script for the calls. Short, factual, emotionless. Henry always said precision is the language of power. At one point, Maggie looked up. "Ruth, are you sure you want to be the one to make the calls yourself?" "Yes," I said. "She took my voice in public. I'll use it in private." By noon, the plan was final. I had a list of contacts arranged by priority: bank manager, venue coordinator, florist, caterer, entertainment company, travel agent, each one marked with confirmation codes and file references. Victor's window flickered as he logged into the banking portal to monitor in real time. We agreed to execute at exactly 1 p.m. At 12:45, Maggie touched my shoulder. "Once you start, don't hesitate. Every delay gives her room to move." "I won't," I said. When they left the room to give me privacy, I sat at the table with my phone beside the lamp. The light from the window fell across the papers like a soft command. Outside, the sea shimmered faintly in the distance. Somewhere out there, Cassie was preparing for her honeymoon. I imagined her scrolling through messages, convinced that public attention could be managed with filters and apologies. At exactly 1 o'clock, I dialed the bank. My voice was calm, every syllable measured. "This is Ruth Ellison. Per contractual clause 9B, I am revoking all linked transfers associated with the Vaughan Ellison event, effective immediately." The representative confirmed my identity, typed notes, and said, "Processed, Mrs. Ellison. All authorizations withdrawn." I thanked her and ended the call. The sound of the dial tone lingered for a moment like the first beat of a song that never continues. Next, I called the venue. The manager answered cheerfully until I mentioned the clause. His tone shifted at once. "Understood, ma'am. We'll halt all post-event charges and flag the account." The florist was next, then the caterer, the band, the travel agent. Each call took less than 3 minutes. Each ended with confirmation. Victor messaged me updates as transactions froze on his screen, one by one, like dominoes in perfect rhythm. At 1:40 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the resort. "Payment declined. Please update your card information." I pictured Cassie standing at the front desk, designer luggage beside her, confusion blooming into panic. The symmetry was poetic. She had said I didn't belong at her wedding. Now, she didn't belong in the paradise she had stolen. I didn't celebrate. I only documented. Each message was saved, time-stamped, stored neatly in the restoration folder. At 1:55, the final confirmation arrived from Victor. "All accounts closed. All funds secure. You did it." I set the phone down and looked around the room. The house was silent except for the steady hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the old wall clock. For a long time, I sat there, listening to the kind of quiet that comes after balance is restored. Then I checked the news feed out of curiosity. Someone had posted live footage from the wedding reception, still going hours after I'd left. The band had just stopped mid-song. Guests were confused, murmuring. Someone whispered into the microphone asking if the system had failed. Then another voice, Cassie's, sharper now, desperate, asking where the coordinator was. The video ended with a caption. The music stopped, literally. I turned off the screen. The irony didn't need explanation. That evening, Maggie called to check in. "It worked flawlessly. The vendors will send confirmations tomorrow. You've set a precedent, Ruth. Calm, legal, perfect." "It's not about perfection," I said. "It's about proportion." After we hung up, I sat near the window as dusk settled over the garden. The sky was pale pink, the air still carrying a trace of salt. I thought of Henry's words again. Silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. I poured a glass of water and looked at my reflection in it. The woman who had walked out of that ballroom didn't look broken anymore. She looked like someone who finally understood the mathematics of dignity. And somewhere, at that very moment, the echo of stopped music was traveling through Cassie's perfect world, unraveling everything she thought she controlled. The day after the plan went into motion, the world woke to chaos, but not mine. For once, I wasn't the one being whispered about. I had already done everything I needed to. My house was quiet, the sun slanting across the hardwood floors, dust motes floating like slow confetti. I poured tea and turned on the radio, but the soft static seemed enough company. The phone on the table was silent, as it should be. It didn't stay that way for long. At exactly 9:15, a message arrived from Victor. Confirmed. Vendor reversals complete. Resort transaction declined at check-in. I imagined the scene. Cassie at a marble counter, gold bracelets catching the light, her smile rehearsed for strangers. The receptionist politely informing her that the payment on file had been declined. Cassie insisting there must be some mistake, calling Liam, her voice rising as confusion spread through the lobby. Victor called a minute later. Everything fell right into sequence. The florist refunded to your account automatically. The band reported a stop order mid-performance last night. You could hear the confusion in their emails. Mid-performance? I asked. He chuckled softly. They said the system froze, lights dimmed. Manager announced a temporary stop. Guests thought it was a planned break. Someone posted a video. You can hear the music cut out halfway through a love song. I thanked him and hung up. I didn't need to watch the footage. I could hear it in my head. The sudden silence, the murmur of guests, the confusion blooming like wildfire. For the first time in months, I felt what peace might sound like. The next call came from the bank. "Mrs. Ellison," the representative said, "your account audit completed successfully. All unauthorized transfers have been reversed, and any linked authorizations under secondary names are now inactive. We'll send documentation by end of day." "Thank you," I said. My voice was steady. Outside, the mail truck stopped at my driveway. I walked out to meet the driver, who handed me an envelope from the bank and one from the catering company. Both confirmed cancellation acknowledgments and zero balance. The rain had cleaned the sky, leaving everything crisp. By late morning, my phone began to buzz again, this time with messages from numbers I recognized but had no desire to answer. Liam, Cassie. Unknown senders. I assumed were vendors or publicists. I let them pile up unanswered. Every ping of a new voicemail was just another record for the folder. Around noon, Evelyn appeared at my door, worry etched on her face. "Ruth, have you seen the news? They're saying the wedding night ended early. The music stopped, people left, the bride was crying by the fountain." "I heard something about that," I said, keeping my tone mild. Evelyn hesitated, her eyes soft. "Did you do something?" I smiled, the kind that hides more truth than it shares. "Just balanced a few accounts." She studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Well, whatever you did, people are calling it justice, not gossip. Justice." When she left, I sat on the porch with my tea, letting the breeze from the sea brush against my face. Somewhere down the street, children were playing, their laughter sharp and bright against the calm day. I thought about how humiliation echoes differently for each person. For Cassie, it would echo in every notification, every text from guests asking what happened. For me, it would end right here, with the sound of the ocean. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email from the resort's accounting office. "We regret to inform you that the payment under Cassandra Vaughn's name has been declined multiple times. Alternate contact listed. Ruth Ellison." I replied quickly, "Please remove my name from any future correspondence. Authorization revoked." 5 minutes later, another message came through. An automatically generated system alert confirming removal. Clean. Done. The afternoon sunlight poured through the window, catching on the frame of Henry's photograph. His face, frozen in time, looked as if it approved. I remembered the first time I balanced a complex account for his court charity, and how he'd said, "Justice and math have this in common. They both depend on balance." I opened the restoration folder again, adding new subfiles: resort decline notice, vendor confirmations, bank audit proof, each one neatly labeled, time-stamped. I printed a fresh copy of the updated ledger and placed it inside the fireproof box under his photo. When I stood, I realized the house was completely still. No phone, no chatter, no music, just quiet, the kind that doesn't demand attention, only offers peace. That evening, Maggie called. "It's all over the local news," she said. "Apparently the bride blamed a system error, but the guests are telling another story. Someone leaked the invoices. The internet's doing the rest." I didn't ask for details. "Let them talk," I said. "I'm done listening." "Good," Maggie replied. Now let them hear silence. After she hung up, I sat in the living room with the lamp turned low. Outside, the sky was painted in deep orange streaks, the horizon glowing like an afterthought of fire. I thought of the ballroom lights dimming, the band pausing mid-song, the murmurs of a crowd realizing something had gone wrong. Cassie had built her world on performance, but she had forgotten the first rule. You can't control the volume when someone else owns the sound system. The clock ticked toward 7, each second soft and deliberate. I closed my eyes and exhaled. The music had stopped, yes, but for me, it had only just begun. The rhythm of quiet justice, steady and irreversible. The next morning arrived with that peculiar stillness that follows a storm, too quiet, too deliberate, as if the world was holding its breath. My phone lay on the kitchen counter, dark for a while, until it lit up with a cascade of missed calls. The log stretched so far down the screen that I had to scroll to find where it began. Liam's number appeared the most, then Cassie's, alternating like dueling voices trying to rewrite what had already been written. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I made tea, the same blend Henry used to prefer, and sat by the window. Outside, gulls circled over the waves, the same color as ash. I stirred the tea twice and listened as the first voicemail began to play automatically. "Mom, please pick up. Cassie's upset. Everything's been canceled. Can we talk?" His tone was soft at first, confused more than angry. I let it run until it ended. Then the next one started. "This is ridiculous, Ruth." Cassie's voice cut in, brittle and high-pitched. "Whatever you think you've done, it's affecting everyone. You can't just—" The message ended abruptly. I sipped my tea and pressed the save icon. The next few messages blurred together. Liam again, alternating between apology and frustration. "You didn't have to go this far," he said once. Another time, "You've humiliated us." I thought about that word, us, and how easily people use it to hide singular guilt behind collective shame. Then Cassie again, quieter this time. "If you wanted respect, you could have just asked and we could have fixed this. You don't understand how the internet works, Ruth. People will turn on you too." I saved that one as well. By noon, there were 23 voicemails, each one a small confession wrapped in panic. Maggie had told me to preserve every piece of communication. Chain of custody, she called it. So I opened the restoration folder and created a new subfolder labeled Voicemails. Evidence. I downloaded each message, labeled them with timestamps, and logged them in a spreadsheet. Old habits die with precision, not time. At 1 p.m., Maggie called. "You've been getting messages?" "Yes," I said. "Good. Save everything. Their tone will shift over time. The first wave is emotional. The second will try to bargain. Eventually, there'll be threats. Don't respond. Just keep the record clean." "I'm not tempted to respond," I said quietly. "I know," she replied. "But I also know mothers. Silence is hardest when the voice on the other end belongs to your child." After we hung up, I replayed one of Liam's earlier messages. "Mom, you've made your point. Just stop. Cassie's embarrassed enough." His voice cracked on that last word, embarrassed. He didn't understand yet that embarrassment was the smallest possible price for deceit. At 3, another call came in. I let it go to voicemail. The alert chimed seconds later. Cassie again. "You think people will pity you forever? They'll forget. They'll move on, and you'll still be alone." Her words were sharp but hollow, the way fear sounds when dressed as defiance. I saved it too. Outside, the light began to fade, painting the horizon in soft silver. I turned off the phone's sound notifications and watched the screen flash silently every few minutes as more messages arrived. There was something therapeutic about seeing the pattern form, a map of desperation that required no response. Later that evening, Victor sent a brief email. All reversals finalized. Recommend no further transactions until audit complete. Keep any communications from involved parties. They're legally useful. I replied with a simple acknowledgement and attached an audio log of the voicemails. He would know what to do with them. I heated soup for dinner, the house filled with the faint scent of thyme. Between spoonfuls, I listened to one last message. Liam's voice again, quieter now, stripped of performance. Mom, please. I don't know what she's done. I just want to talk. I made mistakes. I shouldn't have stayed silent that night. I paused the playback before the end and rested my hands on the table. Silence has weight. It fills the air when words collapse under truth. I didn't delete his message. Some silences are meant to be shared later, when lessons can be heard instead of spoken. When I finally turned off the phone, the house went still again. The clock ticked steadily in the hallway, a quiet rhythm to match my breathing. I poured another cup of tea and looked at the files on my desk, orderly, labeled, untouched by emotion. Justice wasn't loud. It was documented, dated, and quietly waiting to be seen. By the time the sun disappeared behind the sea, I realized something important. Cassie's world had been built on noise, followers, posts, performance. Mine had been built on evidence. Noise fades, records last. I left the phone face down, screen dark, letting the messages keep piling up in the background. Each one was a page in the story she had written herself. I didn't need to add a single word. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. It was a small place tucked near the marina, quiet enough that the sea breeze could slip between tables without disturbing anyone. I chose a seat by the window and ordered black coffee, no sugar. The waitress smiled, probably thinking I was waiting for family. In a way, I was, just not the kind she'd imagine. Nadia walked in a few minutes later, shoulders slightly hunched, sunglasses covering most of her face. She spotted me and froze for a moment before approaching. "Mrs. Ellison," she said softly, "thank you for meeting me." I gestured for her to sit. "You sounded nervous in your message." "I am," she admitted, setting her phone face down on the table. Her hands shook slightly. "I wasn't sure you'd actually want to talk after everything that happened." "I always prefer conversation to assumption," I said. She nodded, glancing out the window as if expecting someone to follow her. "Cassie told me not to meet you. She said you'd tried to drag me into this. But I can't keep quiet anymore. I know what she did." I let her speak. There's a rhythm people fall into when guilt finally finds a voice, halting at first, then tumbling out like water through a crack in a dam. "She made me inflate invoices," Nadia continued. "The floral budget, catering, even the photographer's travel expenses. She said it was standard markup for high-profile clients, but when I checked later, the difference was being routed to her mother's company. She said it was her commission. She made me sign amended receipts." I didn't interrupt. I only sipped my coffee and listened. She also had me send copies of the contracts to her personal email so she could alter line items before forwarding them to you. I didn't know she'd added her name as a co-payer. When the story went viral, I thought the best thing was to stay quiet. But then I saw your messages. The way you handled everything calmly. You didn't deserve what happened." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were printed invoices, emails, screenshots of messages between her and Cassie. One stood out immediately. Cassie's text telling her, "Just add 30% to the invoice. She'll never notice." Nadia slid the folder toward me. "These are copies. I've kept the originals in case you need them legally." I glanced through the papers, each page neatly labeled. "You understand what this means?" She nodded. "Yes, I could lose my business, but at least I'll sleep again." "You're doing the right thing," I said. "Truth always costs something, but silence costs more." Tears welled in her eyes. "You sound like your husband." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "You knew Henry?" "Not personally," she said quickly. "But I read about his rulings. He believed in fairness that didn't humiliate people. That's rare." Her words hit something inside me I hadn't realized was still sore. Henry's voice had been my compass for so long that hearing someone else recognize it felt like a benediction. Maggie arrived halfway through our meeting, carrying her briefcase and that look of quiet authority she always wore in public. She nodded politely to Nadia before sitting down. "I'm here as a witness," she said. "You don't need to worry about legal jargon right now. Just tell the truth." Nadia repeated her story, this time slower, more certain. Maggie took notes, asked a few clarifying questions, then produced a printed statement template. "If you're comfortable, sign this as a formal affidavit. It confirms what you've said and protects you under witness cooperation." Nadia hesitated only for a moment before picking up the pen. "Cassie always said paperwork was just decoration," she murmured as she signed. "I guess she was wrong." When she finished, Maggie slipped the document into her folder and gave her a reassuring nod. "You've done the right thing." As we stood to leave, Nadia stopped me. "There's one more thing you should know. Cassie used your company name, Ellison Trust Holdings, on one of her vendor forms. She said it made her look more credible. I think she registered something under your name." I felt the chill crawl up my spine. "Are you certain?" "Yes. The LLC filing was made 3 months ago. I saw the confirmation email. It listed you as majority stakeholder." Maggie's eyebrows rose. "If that's true, Ruth technically owns whatever business Cassie built with that name. Every dollar she funneled through it could be reclaimed." We left the cafe together, sunlight flashing off the water like small mirrors. Nadia thanked us quietly and promised to forward the registration file. As she walked away, she looked lighter, as if the truth had finally unburdened her shoulders. Back in Maggie's car, I stared out at the sea. "She used my name to build the cage she'll be trapped in," I said. Maggie smiled faintly. "Some people forge their own verdicts. You just have to present the evidence." When I returned home, the email from Nadia was already waiting. Attached were the LLC documents, Ellison Trust Holdings, registered under Cassie Vaughn's business portfolio, with my name listed as majority owner. It was there in black and white, government sealed. I printed the documents, added them to the restoration binder, and sat for a long time, letting the weight of it settle. Every insult, every forged signature, every moment she mistook politeness for weakness, all of it now bound by her own paperwork. Outside, the sky began to darken, but I didn't turn on the lights. The glow from the computer screen was enough. In that light, her empire looked fragile, like glass under steady hands. Henry's words echoed faintly in my mind. When you keep your books in order, deceit always overdraws itself. I closed the folder, took one last sip of cold coffee, and whispered, ledger balanced. By the time the weekend arrived, Cassie had found a new weapon, her phone. I should have expected it. For someone who built her world on attention, losing control of the narrative must have felt like suffocation. The internet was her courtroom, and she was determined to sway the jury. It started early Saturday morning. I was in the garden trimming Henry's rose bushes when my neighbor Evelyn called out from across the fence. "Ruth, she's live again," she said, half whisper, half excitement. I wiped my hands and looked up. "Who?" "Your daughter-in-law. She's crying on the internet." I smiled faintly. "Then she's found her stage." Inside, I opened my laptop, not out of curiosity but necessity. The feed was already trending. Cassie's face filled the screen, perfectly lit, makeup immaculate except for one deliberate smudge of mascara. "I never meant for things to go this far," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound human. "I love my husband. I love my family. And I just want forgiveness." She paused to sniffle, eyes darting to check comments. The comment section moved faster than her words. Some called her brave. Others called her a liar. I read quietly, not reacting, watching the tides of sympathy rise and fall. Then, halfway through her broadcast, Cassie said my name. "Ruth Ellison has frozen my accounts, ruined my reputation, and refuses to speak to me. I just wanted a family. Instead, I got public humiliation." My tea sat untouched beside me, steam curling like a question mark. Evelyn texted, "Don't watch it, Ruth. People are cruel." But I kept watching. The video lasted 15 minutes, enough time for Cassie to craft a tragedy where she was both the victim and the hero. When she finally ended the live stream, the comment count had already crossed 10,000. Within an hour, hashtags using our family name began trending. Maggie called 10 minutes later. "We expected this," she said. "Let her perform. The truth's already working." "How?" I asked. Victor's voice joined the call, calm and steady. "Because public records don't lie. You're officially listed as majority owner of her brand. If she monetizes this apology tour, every cent flows through your name. Someone will notice." He was right. 2 hours later, the first cracks appeared. A user posted a screenshot of state business filings showing Ellison Trust Holdings. "Wait," they wrote. "Isn't this registered to her mother-in-law?" The post spread like wildfire. Other users began connecting dots, screen captures, vendor documents, old press releases. Within 3 hours, the same platform that had once worshipped Cassie turned on her. I didn't smile. Justice isn't joy, it's balance. Evelyn called again around noon. "Ruth, you've gone viral." "That's ironic," I said. "I didn't even post anything." "You didn't have to. The truth posted itself." By afternoon, every entertainment outlet had picked up the story. Influencer accused of defrauding her own mother-in-law. LLC scandal erupts over viral wedding video. The headlines were surreal to read, but not satisfying. Fame and disgrace are siblings. They share the same stage. I went outside to clear my head. The sea was restless again, the wind sharp enough to taste. A few reporters had already parked near the end of the street, hoping for a glimpse or a quote. I drew the curtains and made tea instead. When the next call came, I recognized the voice before the words. "You've destroyed me," Cassie hissed. "You think this makes you noble? People love to hate successful women." "You were successful at deception," I said quietly. "That's a fragile profession." "You're enjoying this." "No," I replied. "I'm documenting it." She exhaled hard into the phone, a sound halfway between rage and panic. "Liam won't forgive you for this." "He will," I said. "He just doesn't know it yet." Then I ended the call and saved the recording. Another file for the folder. That night, I logged on one last time. The internet had shifted entirely. Cassie's video had been dissected frame by frame by viewers who noticed her staged lighting and mismatched timestamps. Someone had even uploaded a side-by-side comparison of her apology background with the same studio she used for sponsored fashion shoots. The comments below were merciless. One user wrote, "She said silence was cruelty. Maybe silence is just honesty." I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, letting those words settle. Later, I checked my voicemail. Liam had called again. 5 messages this time. The last one was short, quiet. "Mom, I don't know what to say anymore. I just want to come home." I didn't cry. I simply sat there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of waves outside. The world was loud enough without me adding to it. When I finally went to bed, the night air smelled of salt and rain. I thought of Henry again, of how he used to say, "You don't need to raise your voice when the truth already echoes." Now it was echoing everywhere, in headlines, in comments, in Cassie's own words looping endlessly online. The digital war she started had no battlefield, only receipts, and every receipt carried my name at the top. I turned off the lamp and let the dark settle, calm and complete. Justice had gone viral, and I hadn't even raised my voice. By Monday morning, the air itself felt cleaner, sharper, as if the world had decided to start taking minutes instead of gossip. I woke early, dressed neatly, and laid everything on the kitchen table. The contracts, the affidavits, the voicemails, the banking statements, the printed screenshots. I had built my own courtroom, and every piece of evidence had already been sworn to by time. Maggie arrived at 9 sharp, crisp and composed as always, with a briefcase so full it looked heavier than she was. "Ready?" she asked. "Always." She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and pulled out a legal pad. "We'll file 3 separate complaints: financial misrepresentation, coercion, and emotional harassment. Victor has already prepared the supplemental banking data. Once we send these, it's all official." Victor joined by video call, his tie slightly crooked, his smile the calm of someone who already knew the numbers told the truth. "Morning, Ruth. You've done the hard part. Now we just write it down." There's a particular kind of silence that fills a room when everything aligns. The silence of order returning. That's what I felt as Maggie began to write. Her pen moved in smooth, precise motions, the sound of ink gliding over paper like rainfall. "I'll courier the full packet to the county clerk's office," she said. "You'll get a stamped copy by the end of the day. After that, the legal machine does what it was built for." I nodded, then reached for a sealed envelope from the pile. "The bank's documentation arrived this morning," I said, sliding it toward her. They confirmed the last attempted transfer from Cassie's account was blocked on Friday. She tried to move $50,000 into a new holding company. Maggie's eyes flicked up, calm but burning with restrained satisfaction. Intent to conceal assets. That's all we needed. Victor's voice came through the speaker, steady and low. "Everything's traceable. I've already drafted the audit report. We'll attach it as Exhibit C." I looked at the growing stack of papers, my initials at the corner of each page, and realized that justice doesn't arrive with trumpets. It arrives with staplers and signatures. By noon, the paperwork was complete. Maggie signed the final page, dated it, and exhaled. There, she said. Every loose thread is now woven into record. I walked with her to the mailbox at the end of the street. The sky had that muted glow it gets just before rain. She placed the envelope inside, closed the lid, and said softly, "Once this is delivered, you can stop carrying it. The system will take it from here." Back inside, I made tea for both of us. She held her cup, studying me. "You don't look triumphant, Ruth." "I'm not," I said. "I'm relieved. There's a difference." "Relief is good," she said. "It's the sound justice makes when it finally lands." The doorbell rang just then. It was Evelyn, holding a newspaper. "You're in it again," she said, handing it to me. The headline read, "Ellison files legal complaints amid viral scandal." Beneath it was a photo of Cassie leaving her apartment, head bowed, face hidden behind large sunglasses. "She'll deny everything at first," Maggie said, scanning the article. "But the documents speak louder than she can." I looked at the photo and felt no anger, only a quiet sorrow for what pride can do when it confuses attention for affection. "She built her life on performance," I said. "But the paperwork was never scripted." Victor sent a text a few minutes later. "Bank confirmed final reversals processed. All fraudulent access revoked permanently." I replied, "Ledger balanced." After Maggie and Evelyn left, I opened the fireproof box beneath Henry's photo and placed the newly signed documents inside. The soft click of the latch sounded final. The air in the house seemed lighter. Later that afternoon, a certified mail receipt arrived at the door. The envelope was stamped and marked as filed, proof that my quiet storm had reached the courthouse. I set it beside Henry's framed photograph and whispered, "Paperwork filed. Case closed." As dusk approached, I took a walk by the water. The tide was low, the waves whispering in their patient rhythm. I thought about how much of life comes down to timing. When to speak, when to listen, when to act. The world had been loud for weeks, but now, finally, the noise was subsiding into order. When I returned home, my phone buzzed once more. A new voicemail. I let it play. Cassie's voice, unsteady this time. "You've won, Ruth. Are you happy? You've destroyed everything." I stared out the window and said softly, "No, Cassie, you did that yourself." Then I saved the message, logged it, and turned off the phone. The paper storm had passed. What remained was stillness, the kind Henry always said follows after the truth has done its work. The letter came on a Wednesday morning, folded neatly in a cream-colored envelope with handwriting I recognized instantly. Cassie's. The postmark was local. For a moment, I considered leaving it unopened, but curiosity is a quiet kind of gravity. It pulls you whether you mean to move or not. I slit the envelope with my nail and pulled out a single page. "Mrs. Ellison," it began, too formal for sincerity. "I'd like to meet. I want to apologize properly. There are things you don't understand, and I'm hoping we can clear the air. Please don't bring Maggie or anyone else, just us. I'll come by the house at 3 if that's all right." She signed it with her usual flourish, a looping C that looked more like a logo than a name. I read the letter twice before setting it down beside my teacup. The timing was deliberate. Midweek, mid-afternoon, when she knew I'd be home alone. Maggie's words echoed in my head. "The second wave will try to bargain." At 3 on the dot, Cassie's car pulled into the driveway. A bright blue convertible, gleaming as though the world hadn't noticed its owner had fallen from grace. She stepped out with practiced poise, holding a bouquet of pale pink roses. Her dress was soft, understated. Another costume, but one designed to look like humility. I met her at the door. Cassie. Ruth. She smiled with effort. You look well. I am well, I said evenly. Would you like to come in? She followed me to the living room, her heels quiet against the wood floor. The sunlight streaming through the windows painted her in gold, but it couldn't soften the tremor in her hands as she placed the flowers on the table. I wanted to apologize, she began, her voice delicate, rehearsed. For the wedding, the words, all of it. I was under a lot of pressure, and I said things I didn't mean. I see, I said. Pressure tends to reveal what's already there. She blinked, then smiled as though I'd misunderstood. I was foolish. I let the stress get to me. I didn't realize how much I'd hurt you until afterward. I nodded slowly. You realized after the bank calls, or after the headlines. Her smile faltered. Ruth, I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air like a verdict. I studied her face. The tears forming in her eyes were almost convincing. Almost. Liam doesn't know yet, she continued, her hand resting lightly on her abdomen. I thought you should be the first to know. I want peace in this family, for the baby's sake. I let silence fill the room for a moment before answering. You're asking for peace, not forgiveness. She looked up, startled. Is there a difference? There is, I said. Forgiveness comes from truth. Peace can be staged. Her composure cracked slightly, but she recovered quickly. I don't expect you to trust me right away. I just hope you'll stop all this legal nonsense. For the child. Something about her phrasing pulled at my instinct. I glanced at the bouquet she had placed on the table. A florist's tag peeked from the ribbon. Elysian Studios, downtown PR division. Not a flower shop, a public relations firm. I met her eyes and said softly, How far along are you, Cassie? She hesitated for a fraction too long. 2 months. Then congratulations. I smiled gently, almost kindly. Did they coach you on that line too, or was it your idea? Her face froze. What? The tag, I said, tapping the bouquet. Your flowers came from a PR studio, not a florist. They're specialists in crisis management. You should tell them to remove their branding next time. Color drained from her cheeks. You're mistaken. No, I said, standing. You are. For the first time since I'd met her, Cassie couldn't speak. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I could see the panic flickering in her eyes, the realization that her performance had collapsed mid-scene. I wanted to believe you, I said quietly. I truly did, but you've turned apology into another campaign. She rose quickly, clutching her handbag. I just wanted to fix things. You wanted to rewrite them, I replied. There's a difference. She hesitated near the door, desperation seeping through her voice. You can't keep doing this. You'll lose Liam. You'll lose everything. I smiled faintly. I already lost everything that didn't matter. She left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. Through the window, I watched her drive away, the roses still on my table like props from a play that had ended badly. I sat down again, picked up the receipt attached to the bouquet, and slid it into my folder. Documentation. Another truth preserved. I sent a short message to Maggie. She came, tried to bait reconciliation. I have proof it was staged. Maggie replied almost immediately. Good. It strengthens your case. Don't delete anything. I placed the flowers in the trash and washed my hands. The scent of roses lingered faintly in the air, cloying and artificial. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, I replayed the brief conversation in my mind. Cassie's trembling voice, the calculated pauses, the false vulnerability. There was no child, no remorse, only performance. But in her desperation, she had given me something more valuable than confession. She had given me motive. The next morning, the phone rang again. Liam's number this time. I didn't answer. He'd call again. I knew. And when he did, he'd be ready to listen, not defend. I closed my eyes, hearing Henry's voice somewhere in memory. When deceit grows desperate, it trips over its own stage lights. He was right. The lights had gone out for Cassie. All that remained was the truth, waiting patiently for its audience. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. The walls, pale and deliberate, seemed to hum with the weight of unfinished stories. I had walked these halls before, years ago, holding Henry's hand as he prepared for hearings. Back then, I was the quiet observer in the gallery. Today, I was the plaintiff. Maggie met me at the entrance, folders in hand, her expression calm but resolute. "Everything's in order," she said. The judge assigned to our case was one of Henry's colleagues. He's fair, and he doesn't appreciate theatrics. "Then we'll get along," I said softly. We stepped into the courtroom together. The air carried the faint scent of paper and polish. A clerk organized files on the judge's bench. Cassie sat across the aisle with her attorney, her posture impeccable, her expression composed but pale. Liam sat beside her, avoiding my eyes. I took my seat behind Maggie, setting my small binder on the table. Henry's old pen rested on top. I hadn't brought it for sentiment. I brought it because I believed he'd approve of precision. When the judge entered, everyone stood. His voice was deep, steady, the kind that could silence an entire room without raising an octave. "This court will come to order," Maggie began with quiet authority. "Your Honor, this case involves documented financial misrepresentation, coercion, and the deliberate misuse of donor funds. All evidence has been filed under Exhibit A through F. My client, Mrs. Ruth Ellison, has provided full cooperation and verified documentation." Cassie's attorney, a young man with too much confidence and not enough restraint, stood. "Your Honor, this is a family matter blown out of proportion. My client has suffered enough public humiliation." The judge didn't look up from his notes. "Public humiliation is not a legal defense, Counselor. Proceed with evidence." Maggie called Victor first. He approached the stand with his laptop and a stack of printed statements. His testimony was clinical, mathematical. Every payment made toward the Vaughn Ellison event originated from Mrs. Ellison's account. Several of those payments were diverted to Vaughn Holdings LLC, a shell company managed by the defendant's mother, Ms. Belinda Vaughn. Additionally, documents show the defendant created a second company, Ellison Trust Holdings, using Mrs. Ellison's name without her knowledge, registering herself as secondary signatory. Cassie's attorney tried to object, but the judge waved him down. "The documents have already been verified," the judge said. "Continue, Mr. Tran." Victor finished with a calm nod. "In simple terms, Your Honor, every fraudulent transaction led back to the defendant's personal gain." Maggie rose again. "Thank you." The plaintiff now submits supplemental evidence, voicemails, and signed affidavits. She connected her laptop to the court's audio system. The first recording filled the room. Cassie's voice, sharp and cold. "You don't understand how the internet works, Ruth. People will turn on you too." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge raised a hand for silence. The next recording played. Cassie's voice again, but softer, pleading. "You've won, Ruth. Are you happy? You've destroyed everything." The judge's expression didn't change. but the air thickened. Cassie shifted in her chair, eyes darting toward Liam. Then Maggie called Nadia to the stand. The planner looked fragile but steady, her hands folded neatly. She testified to everything: the inflated invoices, the forged receipts, the messages Cassie sent. Her voice trembled only once when she said, "I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid to lose my job." Mrs. Ellison never raised her voice at me. She just asked for the truth. That's why I'm here. When she stepped down, Maggie turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks clearly. This isn't vengeance. It's restoration." Cassie's attorney stood, face flushed. "My client." The judge cut him off. "Your client will remain seated." He looked at Cassie then, his gaze measured, not cruel. "Mrs. Vaughn, I've reviewed every document, every statement, and every recording. You used deception to obtain funds, and when confronted, you attempted manipulation instead of apology. This court cannot restore reputation, but it can restore order." He reached for his pen, signed the final page of his ruling, and looked at me. "Mrs. Ellison, justice sometimes comes quietly. You've reminded us of that." He turned back to Cassie. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. All misappropriated assets are to be returned. Ownership of Ellison Trust Holdings will remain with Mrs. Ellison. The defendant is ordered to pay restitution and is prohibited from contacting the plaintiff directly." The gavel struck once, sharp, final, like a door closing gently on chaos. For a moment, no one moved. Cassie sat frozen, her mouth slightly open as if the air had been pulled from her lungs. Liam stared at the table, his hands clasped tightly together. Maggie placed her pen down, her expression unreadable, but proud. As the courtroom emptied, I stood and gathered my papers. Liam finally looked up. Our eyes met for the first time in weeks. His were wet, uncertain. He started to speak, but I raised a hand. "Not here," I said quietly. Outside, the sky was bright, clear, the kind of blue Henry used to call honest weather. Reporters clustered near the steps, shouting questions I didn't answer. I simply walked past them, the sound of their voices fading into the distance. Maggie joined me at the curb. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like something has finally stopped spinning," I said. "The noise, the lies, everything." "Justice delivered," she said softly. I smiled. "No, Maggie, justice recorded." As I drove home, I turned off the radio and rolled the windows down. The wind rushed in, cool and cleansing. I thought of Henry's last voicemail, the one I hadn't listened to yet. I would soon. But for now, silence was enough. The court had spoken, so had the truth. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the world exhale with me. It was almost midnight when the knock came. The kind that doesn't startle you, but settles deep, steady, patient, like someone asking permission not just to enter a house, but a memory. I opened the door and found Liam standing there. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his tie gone, and his eyes, those same eyes I'd memorized when he was 5 years old, looked older than they should have. The porch light caught the streaks of rain on his face, though I couldn't tell how much of it was weather and how much was regret. "Mom," he said softly. "Come in, Liam." He hesitated before stepping over the threshold, as if he wasn't sure he still had the right. His shoes left faint wet prints across the wooden floor. I gestured toward the chair by the fireplace. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket and held it out. It was a small brass key, worn, familiar, wrapped in a scrap of paper. "I found this in one of Cassie's boxes," he said. It's the house key I gave her when we moved in together. I thought she'd thrown it away. I took it from him carefully, the metal still cold from the rain. Why bring it here? Because it belongs to you, he said. All of this does. We sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled softly, filling the spaces where words refused to live. Finally, he spoke again. I should have stopped her that night. I saw what she was doing, but I didn't want another argument. I told myself it was her nerves, her stress, her way of coping, but it was cowardice, mine. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in months, I saw my son. Not the man who'd chosen pride over truth, not the boy who'd looked away when I was insulted, but the fragile bridge between both. Liam, I said quietly, you let her speak for you because silence seemed easier. But silence isn't easy. It's heavy. It just looks light when you're not carrying it yourself. He bowed his head. I thought you hated me. I don't hate you, I said. I waited for you to hear yourself. He nodded slowly, rubbing his palms together. Cassie's gone. She packed her things this morning, said she needed to rebuild her brand somewhere quieter. I didn't stop her. That was wise, I said. He looked up, eyes wet again. What happens now? You rebuild too, I told him. But not your brand, your backbone. He almost smiled at that, but his voice cracked when he whispered, I don't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't something you earn, I said. It's something you make room for. He looked at the key again, turning it between his fingers. I don't even know where to start. Start here, I said, reaching for my phone. There's something you should hear. I scrolled to the last message Henry ever recorded, the one I'd never deleted, the one labeled simply for Ruth. I pressed play and set the phone on the table between us. Henry's voice filled the room, steady, warm, and achingly familiar. If they ever make you doubt yourself, he said, remember who you are. The law can restore order, but only love restores peace. Forgive when it's earned by truth. That's how you protect what's worth keeping. For a moment, neither of us moved. The recording ended with a faint breath, then silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full of memory, of consequence, of the echo of something sacred. Liam's shoulders trembled. He sounds the same, he whispered. He always will, I said. That's what happens when someone speaks from the part of you that never dies. He wiped his eyes, then reached for my hand. His grip was tentative at first, then firm. Thank you, he said, for not shutting the door. I thought about it, I admitted. But then I remembered whose house this is. He managed a quiet laugh, and I felt the smallest warmth bloom in my chest, the kind that comes not from victory, but from release. We sat there a long time, saying little, listening to the rain outside and the low rhythm of the fire. The key lay between us on the table, glinting softly in the firelight. It wasn't just a symbol of ownership. It was choice, the right to close doors and the courage to open them again. When Liam finally stood to leave, he paused at the doorway. Will you call me tomorrow? He asked it. Yes, I said. Tomorrow. He nodded and stepped out into the rain. I watched until his car disappeared beyond the curve of the street, the taillights fading like embers. Inside, I turned off the fire and held the key once more before placing it beside Henry's photo. For the first time since that day at the wedding, I didn't feel hollow. I felt balanced. As I turned off the lamp, I heard the faint echo of Henry's voice again, softer now, folded into memory. Forgiveness is inheritance. And for once, I believed it. Morning came soft and unhurried, the kind of light that doesn't demand anything. I brewed tea, the house still heavy with the scent of rain from the night before. The sea beyond the window was calm again, the tide low, the air salt-sweet and clean. For the first time in months, there was no message waiting, no lawyer's call, no headline, only quiet, and the weight of what came next. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where everything had started, and opened a new document on my laptop. The title at the top of the page read, "The Ellison Foundation for Financial Integrity and Dignity." A mouthful maybe, but the words mattered. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about preservation, turning hurt into something that would outlast me. Maggie helped me draft the charter. Her glasses perched low as she reviewed each clause with the same care she'd once reserved for Henry's legal briefs. "You'll need a board of trustees," she said. "Someone to handle filings, another to oversee grants. Victor's already agreed to manage finances." "I'll handle the mission," I said. "It's simple. We help women and seniors recover from financial exploitation, quietly, discreetly, with dignity." She smiled. A courtroom turned into a lighthouse. Henry would have loved this. "I think he already does," I said. By noon, we filed the foundation's registration. I watched the progress bar spin, then settle on the word approved. There it was, a single confirmation line on a bright screen, marking the end of one story and the beginning of another. Later that day, Evelyn came by carrying a small envelope. "This came for you," she said. Inside was a check from the county restitution office, the first recovered funds from the court order. I knew exactly what to do with it. I opened the drawer of my desk and took out the pendant I'd worn to Liam's wedding, a simple pearl on a silver chain. Cassie had called it quaint. I'd kept it not as jewelry, but as a reminder of that night, of restraint mistaken for weakness, of dignity mistaken for silence. I placed the pendant inside a small donation box marked Seed Gift. "This will start the trust," I told Evelyn. "A piece of something old funding something honest." She nodded, eyes bright. "That's beautiful, Ruth." "Just as should be," I said. In the afternoon, a young journalist named Grace Ralston came by. She couldn't have been more than 30, polite and careful, her notepad clutched like it carried something fragile. "Mrs. Ellison, thank you for agreeing to speak. I know you've declined other interviews." "I'm not here to perform," I said, "but I'll give you 10 minutes for the record." She smiled nervously. "Everyone's calling what you did the silent revolution. You didn't post. You didn't shout. You just acted. What do you want people to take from that?" I thought for a moment before answering. "That silence isn't absence. It's intention. Sometimes the loudest statement you can make is a decision made without anger." She nodded quickly, scribbling notes. "Do you feel vindicated?" "No," I said. "I feel free." Grace lowered her pen. "That's a better ending than any headline I could write." "Good," I said softly. "Then let's end it there." When she left, the house felt still again. The light through the window fell on the binder of documents. Restoration, the one that had started it all. I placed it gently into the cabinet, locked it, and slid the key beside Henry's photograph. The phone rang once. I let it. It rang again, longer this time. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was perfect, measured, deep, earned. I sat back and watched the sea shimmer under the late afternoon sun. A soft breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of salt and lilac. Somewhere, children were laughing. Somewhere else, a woman like me was probably sitting alone, wondering if dignity could survive betrayal. I wanted her to know it could, because I had. I picked up Henry's old voice recorder one last time, pressed play, and let his voice fill the room. "Silence was never empty," he said. "It was full of all the things we teach when no one listens." The recording clicked off. The air stayed warm, alive with memory. Outside, the waves touched the shore, pulled back, and touched it again, steady, unhurried, like forgiveness itself. And in that moment, I realized something simple and final. The world had stopped asking for noise. It had started to listen.